Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'll be discussing today's PMQs as usual, where Rishi Sunak demonstrated his complete lack of either decency or political instinct by making an unprovoked transphobic comment whilst the mother of a murdered trans teenager, Brianna Ghey, was watching from just a few metres away. It's unbelievable. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So I'm going to go over the questions from the two main opposition leaders in unchronological order again, because Rishi Sunak genuinely astounded me today. I know I say he's hopelessly out of touch. I know I say he has no political training or instincts, but this was incredible even for him. Just for those who don't know, Brianna Ghey was a trans girl murdered specifically for being trans. Her mother is basically the nicest person on the planet as far as I can tell. She's been expressing her sympathies for the families of the murderers for what they must be going through. She was in attendance at PMQs today, sat in the public gallery, few metres from the Prime Minister. Sunak will have known this, if for no other reason than Keir Starmer pointed it out in his opening address before the questions kicked off. And as part of the questioning about Sunak's record to do with the NHS, which I'll get to in a moment, the Prime Minister tried to defend himself by saying, amongst other things, you know, Starmer had broken loads of policies, including on the difference between a man and a woman, thus pushing the Tories, phrase, oh, trans women aren't women. That's what they keep saying. Trans women aren't women, trans men aren't men, right? And he went further than that. He didn't just mention it. He says, oh, but Starmer's only U-turned 99% of that. Essentially, what Sunak is doing here is pushing his party's transphobic culture wars in response to a question about NHS waiting lists. Keir Starmer did not talk about trans issues in his question. He was talking about NHS waiting lists. But the mother of a murdered trans girl, murdered for being trans, was sat right above him. And he knew that. I have seen some crass comments from political leaders in my time. I'm not sure I've seen anything quite so abhorrent and lacking in basic awareness as this. Was it because Sunak prepared this line in advance? You know, was it because his advisor said, oh, use this line if he asks you about anything? Doesn't matter what he asks you, just use this line. And his advisors didn't know that Ghey's mother would be in the public gallery, so they didn't have time to hastily rewrite the spurious response. So that's what I imagine has happened. What I do know is what it highlights is Sunak's basic lack of decency. Regardless of any pre-prepared lines he might have had in an attempt to evade the questions, anyone with a modicum of awareness would have dropped the idea of being transphobic the second they found out who was in attendance. Absolutely unbelievable. Starmer, of course, pointed out how crass the remark was this week of all weeks. He said that it was the role of Prime Minister to ensure that every single citizen in this country feels safe and respected. I mean, how much worse does it make already, trans people's lives when you haven't just got transphobic people around you? You've got the government actually attacking you and attacking the fact that you should have protections. Sunak was completely unmoved, of course. Another MP later asked Sunak specifically to apologise for the remark. He did not do so. Other MPs called out for Sunak to apologise. He ignored them. Simply could not believe what I was watching. And I already had a pretty low view of Sunak. I'll tell you something, though. He might not have apologised when prompted by MPs in the House today. He will be. In fact, by the time this video is published, he may well have done. The second he's back in the company of his advisors, they'll be getting out the sock puppets to explain just what he's done. And it'll be Operation Damage Limitation for the rest of the day. And if he doesn't apologise pretty quickly, the rest of the week. So he will apologise. But he'll need to be told to apologise because he doesn't really have a clue himself. He'll feel aggrieved that he has to apologise. So it will be a fake apology. And it will only go as far as he thinks he needs to limit the damage. It's fairly unbelievable that even some Tory MPs around him laughed at his crass comments. You'd have thought they'd have gone, what is he saying? Including Victoria Atkins. We all know how they think. We all know how they think. But surely there were some Tory MPs there who realised that this was an incredibly bad look. I mean, Victoria Atkins, she's the health secretary. She's got nothing to laugh about this week. Shows it's not just Sunak who's out of touch. But before I move on, I must just address the end of PMQs. So after the question, Rishi Sunak had the nerve to address Brianna Ghey's mother directly. He praised her compassion and empathy. But he didn't apologise for his behaviour in the House earlier. He just made his prepared statement, which does sort of make you think his advisors probably did know she was there because they prepared a statement for him to talk to her. In which case, why did they leave the transphobic comment in? But he made his statement without once reflecting on his own cock-up and then buggered off out the chamber. No doubt to be greeted by the very stern-looking sock puppets. But although that was by far and away the most calamitous thing to come out of Sunak's mouth at PMQs today, or indeed ever, it was not the only one. So going back to Starmer's first line of question, it was mostly about the NHS today. And he started off with waiting lists. He asked Sunak if he was pleased he hadn't bet a grand on those coming down. And Sunak responded by saying, well, at least he sticks to what he says. You what? He literally promised to get NHS waiting lists falling over a year ago, and they've increased by about 1 million people. The complete lack of self-awareness was on full show, even before he decided that a transphobic comment in the face of a mother who lost their child due to transphobia was a good move. But it's not only NHS waiting lists where Sunak has very obviously not stuck by what he said. We can look at a few others. Sticking with the NHS, he said he was going to fine people £10 for missing GP appointments. Then, when someone pointed out to him that people were voters, he scrapped the idea. He committed to HS2, then scrapped the entire project. He was going to announce legislation against 20-mile-an-hour zones in the King's Speech. Then, when the King's Speech came along, oh, it's not there. Yes, someone had told him that 20-mile-an-hour zones are actually quite popular with Conservative voters, so he dropped it. He promised to grow the economy. We're probably days away from finding the GDP data for December. At best, at the absolute best, it will show that our economy remains stagnant. There's a decent chance it will show technical recession. He promised more onshore wind farms. No. Sticks by what he says? It's hard to find anything he actually does stick by, other than his ambition to become a billionaire at the expense of us all. Above all, he promised to return integrity to government, a pledge he abandoned within moments of making the statement, but which was completely blown out of the water with his crass comments today. And in response to Sunak trying to dodge talk of waiting lists by talking about the cost of Labour policies, Starmer then said Sunak should not be talking about tax cuts when he is the expert on putting taxes up. He then referenced the ill-advised bets with Piers Morgan again about whether he will get Rwanda flights off the ground, and fired back by doubling down, Rishi Sunak, doubled down on his false claim that Starmer chose to defend terrorists. I said it yesterday. Starmer should absolutely see the pants off him. Obviously, Sunak is protected from legal action for what he said in the House today, but not for what he said in that interview. And Stephen Flynn for the SNP, he also asked about that ill-advised bet with Morgan. He said that Sunak had degraded his office and would he apologise? Now, Sunak certainly reined back from the bet yesterday, so would he apologise? No. I mean, to be honest, if he won't apologise for making transphobic comments on camera in front of someone whose child was murdered by transphobes, he ain't going to apologise for placing a bet on a different kind of human misery and one that mostly affects people who don't vote at all. And sure enough, Sunak didn't. Just banged on about illegal immigrants who weren't actually illegal immigrants. Flynn then asked which made Sunak look more out of touch, saying that the cost of living crisis is easing, as he did yesterday, I think it was, or gambling on the Rwanda policy. Sunak, in another display of Liz Truss levels of self-own, said that the SNP government's making the cost of living crisis worse by putting up taxes. Now, if Rishi Sunak thinks that putting up taxes makes the cost of living crisis worse, he needs to remember he is actually the leader of the Tory government who have raised taxes to record levels in modern times and are still raising the overall rate of tax this year. And isn't that a frank admission that it's actually Sunak and his Tories making the cost of living crisis worse? But there we are, another PMQ is characterised by a desperately out-of-touch Prime Minister, sat on a legacy of abject failure. He has no record to defend, but he's trying to pretend that he's doing a bang-up job. Incredible hubris, even by the standards of a Tory. And I don't think it's going to get any better as we get towards the election. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.